We all wonder how close death is. By the end of this show, we will all be a little closer to death. But what about those individuals who have had near-death experiences and then return to tell us all about it? Better stay awake for things visible and invisible. Shaun Tabatt has worked for many years in the publishing industry, currently serving as publishing executive and production manager for Nori Media Group's Destiny Image and Harrison House imprints. But he is also the host of the Shaun Tabatt Show podcast, as well as the co-author of 3 books on near-death experiences. And he joins me down the line from his home in South Carolina. Shaun, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Shaun, near-death experiences. I'm sure you've been asked this before, but there are some skeptics amongst us who would say that they are simply sort of imaginations running riot, people falling asleep and waking up and having a dream experience. You've spent many years researching near-death experiences. Do you think there's anything in it?
I actually absolutely think there is something in near-death experiences. In terms of people saying it's just imaginations, the wandering of the brain, maybe a vision or a dream. I think where that line of thinking starts to fall apart is when people are clinically dead, no heartbeat, no brain activity. Some of the people I've met and interviewed through the years, they've been dead for a half hour, an hour, a time that they shouldn't be able to come back from. And yet they come back with all these vivid memories and stories from touching the other side. So if people weren't clinically dead that I've met, I might be willing to lean into that vision or dream line of thinking. But the fact that there's nothing left happening in their body says there has to be something that happened where they likely did touch the other side.
So we're not talking about people who imagine that they have died or have dreamt that they have died. You're actually dealing with people who have died, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, just generally speaking, a near-death experience typically occurs when somebody is at death, gravely ill or clinically dead. So there are people who have these out-of-body experiences when they're very sick, but not technically clinically dead. And there are others who, like, they're clinically dead, flatline, nothing going on. In either circumstance, it seems that their soul leaves the body and they cross into an out-of-body experience, and it kind of goes forward from there.
Okay, so I mean, the first question on my mind, Shaun, when I was looking at the many books you've written on this or co-written on this subject, what got you into this?
It was actually my work in publishing. I worked on a book with my good friend Randy Kay, who I didn't know at the time at all when his book proposal came in. He had a book called Dying to Meet Jesus, and that's really what had me start going down the rabbit hole. I would work with Randy on multiple books after that, and we had a podcast that was popular for many years talking about near-death experiences, and it was really Randy that ushered me into this world. But it was, meeting all these people who've had these encounters and seeing how their lives have been transformed on the other side of these experiences that got me excited and interested in the space. So it's not a place I ever planned to be in, but it was, encountering somebody who had a life-changing experience that immersed me in the space, and I haven't left since.
There is a difference, however, Shaun, between having an interest in something, which, I mean, and meeting people who have had interesting experiences and co-authoring 3 books about it. Do you feel sort of specially called in a way to discuss or explain these experiences?
Yeah, I'm somebody who really likes to understand things. I share in my latest book, in terms of some of the things I encountered as a young child. I talk about growing up in what I could best describe as a haunted farmhouse. And so I did have encounters with what, looking back now, I would have thought they were ghosts back then, but now I would say they were likely demons that we encountered in that space. So I got introduced to the supernatural or the paranormal at a young age. So I've always had an interest and an intrigue with this space. But it was definitely an intentional decision to, I guess, work on so many books and write and research and interview in this space, mostly because I saw how it impacted people's lives. I've met so many people who have lost a loved one and they're looking for hope about, is heaven real? Is my loved one who's gone, are they on the other side? And they often turn to the internet and these near-death experience stories, these interviews, these testimonies, if you will, for hope about that their loved one is on the other side. And so that's a large part of what drives me to work in this space, is that people derive a lot of encouragement when they're grieving and missing their loved ones.
Now, the whole sort of spectrum of near-death experiences and their interpretation is quite wide. I'm sure you're aware of this. We move from a kind of New Age perspective through to sort of spiritualism and that whole business of clairvoyance and various
Right.
other. So just to put the parameters around our discussion, Sean, where were you coming from into this subject? What was your kind of thinking as you were going into it?
Yeah, I mean, I am a Christian, so I definitely try to make this work out within a Christian worldview. I would say, just based in the publishing space I worked in, that was kind of where I started. And then because I'm super curious about this space, I've interviewed widely and read widely at people coming at this from all sorts of different angles and perspectives. And so yeah, from my perspective, I'm trying to make it make sense within a Christian worldview. But no matter who you are, whether you're somebody who's had a near-death experience or you're somebody who's interested in the space, you're trying to make sense of it through your own worldview lens. Everybody wants to know what happens when they die. Everybody wants to know what's on the other side. So we tend to try to process it through our own worldview lens and often our faith lens.
So presumably, the people you were speaking to, Sean, came from a whole diverse backgrounds. I mean, they weren't
Right.
exclusively Christian. Was that your experience, that there was a certain commonality to what people were experiencing, whether they were Christian, atheist, or belonged to another religion or none?
Yeah, people have a wide range of things that happen within these experiences, but there is a lot of consistency. And so, the details seem to be often tailored to the individual, but, usually it starts with a catastrophic event. Their spirit leaves their body. They have some kind of an out of body experience. They'll cross some kind of a threshold or a veil, which often looks like light or a tunnel, and that seems to indicate that their spirit has crossed over to the other side. And then from that point, some people have hellish experiences, some people have heaven experiences, and depending on which direction their experience goes, that dictates kind of whether they might encounter God or angels or demons. Sometimes they'll encounter lost loved ones, people that have gone on to heaven before them. And so I would say certainly, that somebody's worldview perspective would vary how they're going to interpret it on the other side of that. But there's a ton of consistency in how these experiences tend to work out kind of beat by beat across the many individuals who've had them.
So that's really interesting, Sean. What you're saying, whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Christian, whether you belong to another religion, you had a similar experience. As you say, what your interpretation of it was on the other side when you came out of it is maybe markedly different. But there's a commonality about these experiences. You hinted at what those experiences would be, leaving the body, going down. Can you just flesh that out for us a little bit? What's the common experience? I mean, does somebody realize at the moment of death that they are dead?
No, it's very typical for people to not even realize that they're dead. I have a good friend, Jim Woodford. He overdosed on a medication that he was taking for a particular illness that he had, and he had driven out to this field that he was about to sell on his property, and all of a sudden he felt better than he'd have ever felt in years. And so he gets out of the truck and is walking in the field, and he turns around and he sees a guy slumped over the steering wheel of his truck, and he gets angry. He's like, what the heck, this guy, he's passed out in my truck. I'm going to go give him a piece of my mind. And as he moves back towards the truck, he realizes it's him. He realized that he's dead and slumped over the steering wheel of his truck. And so often people have a bit of disorientation, like they don't quite realize that they've died in the first few moments, but they'll often say that because they're no longer tethered to their physical body, so to speak, if they were very, very sick and have been ill for some time, that they've felt better than they've felt in years. They feel better than they've ever felt, and all of their senses are elevated as far as they can go. People talk about, they don't need to speak, like it's like thought to thought or spirit to spirit communication between beings, when people are in this afterlife sort of experience. So, but yeah, to answer your question, people often don't realize that they've died until they get a ways into the experience.
Okay, so they move into this experience and maybe they realize there's something something amiss, as you say. They see themselves. I mean, is that one of the commonalities as well, that there's a kind of way in which people are viewing themselves, maybe viewing themselves as on a hospital bed or in a mortuary or
Sure.
something?
Yeah, when people their spirit first leaves their body, they enter into an out of body experience. Some people are in that state for an extended period of time. Some people have even told me stories of being able to travel to other locations. Often you're in that space before you transition towards that tunnel or that light to the other side. But during that out of body experience, people will recount, being able to see what's happening in the emergency room, see what's happening in the ER, being able to recount specifically like what the doctors were doing, the specific tools they were using, things that they said, their loved ones who are in the waiting room, waiting to hear the results of the procedure. They'll be able to recount those conversations that they had, indicating that their spirit was really outside of their body because they were either dead or under anesthesia, yet they know the specific details of what was happening to their physical body or what people, around them were saying. So during that out of body experience, that's the circumstance where people report, like feeling like they're looking down, able to see their body and seeing kind of what's happening around them.
And are they able to, consciously hear what's going on? Are they able to hear voices? Presumably, they're not able to interact, though, in the situations that they're observing.
Yeah, they're able to hear what's going on, hear what people are saying, but no matter what they do, they're not able to get somebody's attention. I share briefly in my latest book about an experience I had while my wife was on her cancer journey. She died about a year ago, but about 8 months before she passed, she had a couple of near-death experience related incidents, and one of them was an out-of-body experience where we kind of talked through what had happened, and just based on functionally how the room was organized, there's no way that she could have seen me. She was on a hospital bed. I was sleeping on an air mattress in that room. And yet she described where it was like she was floating above me. And no matter what she did, she couldn't get my attention. She couldn't communicate with me or anything like that. And so there are a lot of stories where when people don't quite realize that they've died yet, or even if they realize, where they will try to interact with the people that they're seeing around them in in their environment during their out of body experience, but they won't react. They can't see them. They can't hear them because they're out of their physical body. They're in their spirit body, so to speak.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about your wife's loss.
Thank you.
So people, they realize that there's something not right. They realize that they
Right.
are not in their normal sphere. They have these out of body experiences. What happens next then in this sort of journey that they go through?
Yeah, the out of body experience tends to end once they're like pulled up. They'll report being pulled up towards the ceiling if their physical body is in a room, or if they're outside somewhere. They'll feel like their spirit is being pulled up into the sky, and then typically they see a light or a tunnel or both, and it's going through that tunnel or going into that light that somehow indicates a threshold into the other side. Once they cross over, they'll enter into a place that, functionally speaking, I would call the second heaven, because it's not the third heaven where God is exactly, but there often are angels or demons there. I've had people report, once their soul transitions, seeing angels and demons warring over their soul, or they'll look one direction and it's beautiful and lush, and the other direction it's like dark and parched and all evil looking. So people often end up in this sort of liminal or in between space before crossing into often either a heaven or a hell type near death experience.
And what sense do you make of that? I mean, you mentioned the potential second heaven. Is it a kind of a
Right.
limbo, a kind of a purgatory almost that people are entering into?
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite purgatory from the Catholic sense, but it does seem to be this sort of in between space. People who have a heaven experience will often recount coming to what seems to be the gates of heaven, where they will encounter what we typically would describe as a welcoming committee or a welcoming party. Often it's made up of loved ones, friends, or family who've gone on before you, and some people are allowed to go cross the threshold of the gate, if you will, and into heaven. Other people aren't allowed, and then you have people who are taken into hellish experiences. So there does seem to be this sort of in between space that's not quite to heaven, not quite to hell, where people will have some level of encounter with beings before they enter into that latter part of their experience.
And what is that?
The latter part of the experience?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one that's really fascinating for me is I have a good friend named Brian Melvin. He died from cholera. Oddly, he drank tainted water at a construction site, but he finds himself in this place where he has a deceptive encounter in his near death experience. He lands in what looks like kind of like his front yard, the house where he grew up, and there are people welcoming him there, just like a typical welcoming committee scenario. And they're like, "Oh, Brian, we're so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome to heaven," kind of thing. And Brian would tell you if he had been resuscitated in those early moments, he would have thought he was fine. Like he went to heaven. It's all good. When he dies again, he's going to be back there, the next time. And he eventually sees somebody that looks like his mom, and he starts to think, my mom's not dead. Like what the heck? Why would she be here welcoming me to heaven? And in Brian's circumstance, once he had that thought, what looked like the departed souls of people, friends and family welcoming to heaven, shift into these like serpent looking demonic like beings. And in this encounter, one of them eventually like tears open a hole in the sky and leads him through this doorway or this portal down into hell, and he has this whole hell experience. So Brian is probably one of the most unique like limbo interim experiences where it was just this complete overt deception, and he's taken, starts out in what seems like a heavenly experience and ends up in a hellish experience.
What do you make of that, Sean? Because there's something a bit disturbing about that. Because a lot of the people that you'll have talked to will have had an experience which is, as you say, quite common, and it's one which is
Right.
moving towards a positive of some sort. But this is something where what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, is not actually real or not what it purports to be.
Right.
What sense? I mean, as a Christian, what sense do you make of that?
Well, and that's kind of the whole point of the new book, was to try to make sense of these deceptive or these strange near-death experiences that don't follow like the normal pattern or normal rhythm that we've seen. In a case like Brian's, from my perspective, and again, I can't fully explain the mechanics of how it works yet. That's just something I'll probably be researching for decades. But somehow, once the soul transitions into that second heaven space, there are these circumstances where it seems like these experiences are being hijacked. Whether that is, whether it's Satan or demons, something seems to be taking over these experiences, and gave Brian a deceptively hellish experience, and then he ends up going down into like what followed after that was a very typical hell experience. Other cases that I find concerning, there are these like ball of light near death experiences where people will say, I died. All of a sudden, they think they've gone to heaven. They see this being that's a ball of light, and everything feels like love. And, I'm in everything, and everything's in me, and we all go to heaven no matter what happens, kind of a thing. And often in those circumstances, they'll come back with some kind of strange theological ideas or, the things they learned from who they think is God that are just odd. Probably the oddest one that I included in the book was a woman who she died during surgery, and she has one of these ball of light NDEs, and the being tells her that things like cannibalism and rape and murder aren't bad. Those are they're for soul growth and like getting you ready for what's to come, kind of a thing. And so in those cases, people often come back with some evil or just strange ideas. And I think those are another circumstance where those experiences are likely being hijacked. So Brian's was very overt. Some of these ball of light experiences, they're more covert, but there's enough truth, I think, in those for people to feel like it's a legitimate experience. Like they're dead, they're on the other side, but it seems to be a circumstance again where they're being hijacked as opposed to a more traditional leaning heaven or hell experience. It's typically very clear who God is and who angels are, or who Satan and demons are. I find these ball of light circumstances where it's just this ball of light, and it's whoever this being is isn't really revealing who they are. It's just super vague and nondescript. Versus these other types of experiences, it's very clear who the players are, so to speak. So I find in both those circumstances, I think something is happening where those are being hijacked and taken into a different direction.
We're coming to the end of this episode, Sean, and this is absolutely fascinating. But just to finish off, because we left people going that way, the left-hand path, are there people who then encounter something which they consider to be God in these experiences?
Yeah, it's not uncommon for people to enter into a heaven experience like we talked about earlier, where they'll cross the gates into heaven, and they'll often encounter Jesus or God the Father, and it seems to be related to how they need to encounter him, in the sense, like I have a good friend, Heidi Barr, who died tragically during a horse riding accident as a teenager. Her horse fell across her chest, and she came from a very rough background, abusive home, and she encounters God as God the Father, and she sits on God the Father's lap in her heaven experience, which was really comforting to her and encouraging to her. And so, yeah, there are many circumstances where people have stories of encountering God, sometimes as the Father, sometimes as Jesus, sometimes as the Holy Spirit.
Amazing. Sean, for now, tell people where they can find out more about you and pick up copies of your books.
The book is widely available. The NDE Conspiracy is my latest one, available wherever books are sold. Probably the easiest way to remember me and find out more is just go to ndeconspiracy.com. That'll take you to a page on my website with my books, as well as information about me.
And also tell people about your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I do have a YouTube channel out there that has both my content for the Shaun Tabatt Show as well as episodes from Randy Case and my podcast, Two Christian Dudes. A good range of NDE related content on there. And then I also regularly interview authors on a weekly basis. So if you want to find out new books to read or get NDE related content, that's on my YouTube channel as well.
For now, Sean, thank you very much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.